Welcome back to Neon Galactic, a YouTube podcast produced by PBS affiliate Key TV. I'm your host, James Falk. Thanks for joining us. Maybe the universe is way more complicated than we've come to believe. And if it is, one of the great opportunities afforded by this re-examining and re-experiencing of reality is a suddenly accessible reunion with the visionary, the transcendent. Most people today are ears deep in the material world we've mostly come to believe is all there is. Atoms and molecules randomly coming together and falling apart according to the dictates of chance. But such a view saps much of the meaning and power out of life and out of human experience. So what does it mean to reassess? How do we as individual men and women rediscover a universe that tells an important story, one that has depth and charge, one that signifies in endless ways how and why we're each as integral to the universe as gravity or light? One way to learn is to read the books of Mike Fiorito. In his most recent work, For All We Know, Fiorito writes about UFOs. He writes about a transcendent universe, one alive with mythic possibility where we're all nodes in a vast web of meaning. And this interconnectivity isn't necessarily an exotic phenomenon, but one that surrounds us all if we're willing to engage. The book is a subtle but powerful declaration in the face of nihilistic materialism, and one that gives us all permission to open up and embrace an imaginal world. In his review of For All We Know, writer and researcher Joshua Cutchin, a former guest on this show, says, quote, "For All We Know takes us on a journey to the greatest of unknowns, not only the world of UFOs, but ourselves and reality, revealing that in order to understand the outer world, we must also turn inward," unquote. It's my pleasure to welcome award-winning author Mike Fiorito to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, James, and that is what a lovely introduction. I really do appreciate that. And man, you hit on a lot of points that you got it, and I really appreciate that. I do realize that some folks that are kind of nuts and bolts UFO folks, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone and their experiences, they might not dig the book. And I understand that not everything's going to be liked by everyone, but you really got what I was going for, which was to manifest the numinous sometimes in the everyday.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I really liked about your book is that, I mean, it's a fiction book, but it's written in the first person, and the main character goes through different episodes in his life, and during those he experiences some sense of the eternal, some sense of a bigger project than what we're typically led to believe is what we're, dealt in life. And I can't help but see a reflection of myself in a lot of that. There's individual moments where I can look back and say, that was weird, and I don't know how to explain it given everything that I've been told about what's supposed to be real. And
Right.
He has a lot of things in common with me in other ways, which we'll probably get into. But yeah, he's a likable character, and he's learning the lessons that I think a lot of us are trying to learn. So just to start off, my first question is, why write the book? And I hadn't heard of you before, so sorry about that. But
That's okay.
I love this book, and you have a bibliography that looks very exciting to me now. Can you talk about where this fits in your overall bibliography?
Sure. And I haven't heard of me before, so no, don't worry about that, James. So I've written books that Um, I have a book called The Hated Ones, which was about growing up in New York City in the 70s, and you'll see reflections of that in For All We Know. Just to talk about For All We Know for a minute, well, we'll be talking about it a lot, but specifically here, why I chose it's a novel format. You can't get you cannot get a UFO kind of testimonial book story published by a mainstream publisher. They won't touch it.
Yeah.
Even Anomalist and other publishers that publish narratives like that, they won't publish a first person account. There are just too many of them, and that's what I've been told. Also, I wanted the latitude of I wanted the discretion to include things that haven't happened to me,
Sure.
and to write a fictional novel. Another thing I was trying to achieve as well was to engage people. There are some people that will not pick up if it says UFO, they won't pick it up. It's too far out. It's too crazy. They won't touch it. And I wanted to write something that speaks to. I was trying to achieve a literary level to speak to people that they'd be surprised how interested they are in the topic if they can engage with it in a way that made it feel. Sometimes the stories are extraordinary, the chapters, the events that happen, but much of it is quite everyday,
Yeah.
you know. And I wanted to touch on a kind of spoke of subject matter, death, for example. There's a lot of that's a big theme in the book, and the kind of uh, liminal space between life and death, and the terrestrial life as much as the extraterrestrial life. So while I think it's great to look up here, out there, it's also, as you noted, Joshua Cutchin said, to look inward. And
Yeah.
from my perspective, those two are very much related.
Yeah.
The
It's sort of
deeper
like
we look in,
it's
yeah,
like sort of like the classic hermetic as above, so
yeah,
below kind of thing, you
exactly.
know? Yeah.
It's what I often say. There's other things that there's a Alexandra David Neal. She wrote extensively about Tibet, traveled to Tibet. She said they don't have words for paranormal, and there are uh, people that practice. They're practicing meditation. Things happen to them. They can do things like bilocate. They can do things like levitate. But these are things that are believed to be achieved by a spiritual practice. In our everyday consensus reality, in the West, and of course I'm generalizing, it's funny how much of our world we live in fantasy. You think people watch TV, they listen to music, they're constantly thirsting for transcendence, for getting out of the everyday. But we kind of think, and we all fall victim to this, we think in our ego, in our little contained ego, that we're in control of things, and we're not.
Yeah.
Um, and while it's very important to, you have to get up and go to work, you have to write that article, you have to take care of your children, get flowers for your wife at her birthday and anniversary. There's a vast universe that's really right in front of us. It's right here, it's right now, and it's stranger than we can even imagine, as well as it's also everyday and ordinary.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And I think that it's interesting, we've had this notion, and I think it started probably in the Enlightenment era or whatever, where it's a slow process, but we'll eventually get to the place where we understand everything because it's all mechanical. And if we
Hmm.
just take it apart and we go slow enough and write down all the pieces, eventually we can put it all back together and we'll have a really deep understanding of what reality and truth are. But I mean, we're deluding ourselves in a lot of ways, I think. And there has been, I think, increasingly since the discovery of quantum mechanics, at least, that there is a realization that we need to be way more humble about what we think reality actually is. Because, I mean,
Hmm.
with, the observer effect and everything else that happens in quantum mechanics, there's no way to, explain that in a way that fits within the physicalist notions of what's real. And I think that we've spent the last 100 years trying to figure out how to deal with that. And even now, I mean, I think that we're struggling with that. And to me, that just opens up the possibilities that it's okay to consider deeper levels of reality because um, science doesn't necessarily have the answers. And I'm not, one to put down science, but I think that that's important for us all to realize that just because people have gone to school and got the degrees and understand, math and all that stuff, that doesn't mean that they necessarily have a more lucid grasp of anything into the nature of reality, especially when people's interior experiences speak truth to them. I mean, part of what goes on is that we ceased to consider the interior and we
Hmm.
consider only exteriors, and therefore we've disqualified that as any kind of real experience. But they're experiences that we've been having throughout the history of mankind, and what your book did for me was help to demonstrate how we can grasp at that in the various ways and in surprisingly mundane ways that we wouldn't necessarily consider as normally transcendent. But then when you go back and you think about it, like listening to a song that you love or hearing a performance, especially that connection that you feel with the performer or the crowd, how you're all lifted into this like kind of domain is transcendent. And I mean, I don't know what else you'd call it, but spiritual, but we
Hmm.
can't speak in that language anymore, you know? And
Yeah,
your book gives permission.
you said a lot. Thank you, and you said a lot of things that really resonate. There's I was talking to a musician um, about something I'm working on, and it's getting candid stories from musicians. And one of the things he plays with the Grateful Dead or the Dead and Company,
Yeah.
that the audience, the band and the audience, when things are going right, feel like they're traveling.
Yeah.
And it's not just because of a psychedelic substance or they're high. It's just that, and as a musician, and if you're deeply into music, you know when you hit that groove. I just saw Diana Krall this Saturday, and I knew she was great. I have her CDs. I didn't realize just how amazing she is. Her
Yeah.
voice and the smokiness and the mood, she just gripped. That audience was just in the palm of her hand. And it takes you to places that, like you said, you can't describe. You begin to sound silly once you start to describe it.
Yeah.
And then going back to, you talked about science. It's interesting when you look at Schrodinger, when he was working on quantum mechanics, and his mind was blown. He began to write about spirituality. He wrote a book called What is Life, which was became the basis for research into and discovery of the DNA molecule.
Yeah.
But just his profound, blown away by the mathematics and the complexity and the strangeness, the high strangeness of what they were discovering. Yet, you look at, and I don't mean to drop names, but they're just names of people I've read and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No, please.
Uh, Steven Weinberg, who won a lot smarter than I am. He won the Nobel Prize in physics, and he has a book, and I've enjoyed his books. He has a book called Dreams of a Final Theory, which is, to me, is A, is obnoxious. B, it sounds unscientific,
Yeah.
because wouldn't I, like you said, I believe in the scientific process. Science gives us amazing things. Television. We're having this conversation, across a great distance in real time, and the myriad ways we can list. But science is a tool. It's a tool, an applied method to understand a phenomena and to uh, make use of something. That was badly worded, but it's a moving target.
Yeah.
Newton was right until he wasn't. Einstein was right until he wasn't. Quantum mechanics, we can't get the general theory of relativity and quantum mechanics to connect. I think to myself, I said, well, do they have to? Why do they have to?
Yeah.
Um, does it have to be this kind of bridge that, but, maybe the other idea there is that there will come a future science that will have a deeper understanding. And I think that science, when we expand that footprint of science to include the numinous, to include the incomprehensible, to include magic, when scientists become oracles, on some level, and that sounds extreme. I think that it will become there will be a bigger tent to include things that maybe we don't understand right at this moment, but we can give room to consider.
Yeah.
And so, that's where I was going with For All We Know, which was an intentional title. For all we know, we don't know it all.
Exactly.
And I studied philosophy and psychology undergrad. I would say the predominant view was materialism. The mind consciousness arises from the brain. And of course there's a connection there. There is a connection there. Dualist uh, versions of that don't localize consciousness to the brain only. Maybe the brain is an antenna that channels into, but there's a deeper river that leads to an ocean of consciousness.
Yeah.
Um, Tibetans have this perspective. Many cultures have this perspective. We have it in the West as well. John Dewey was a philosopher who felt that consciousness was the engagement of our, not just our brain, but our being with experience,
Yeah.
with reality. And as we engage with the world, we manifest consciousness. That consciousness it should include the ecosystem. It should include the word, I think it's Apache, the word for mind is the same word for land.
Wow.
And think of the implications that has.
Yeah.
And you'll notice, and you rightly said that the alchemical expression, as above, so below, there's a lot of terrestrial life in the book. There's a lot of nature.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I wanted the character, you'll notice that the character, he's not trustworthy. He's skeptical. And actually he's not trusting, he's not trustworthy, because he's a little dopey and not reliable. Like all of us on
Yeah.
some level, where we don't know the whole story. We have a working model that seems to get us through things, but it's incomplete. But this narrator, this character, goes through some experiences which are, some are kind of, I think some are funny, or intended to be, and some are a little horrific, having a gun put up to his head.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a journey of discovery. So even this skeptical person, the city kid who got his butt kicked and got his hat handed to him, has this opportunity to grow, to learn, to talk to trees. And I think it's more interesting to have tension in a character. And I think we like characters that we think we know more than them.
Yeah.
They're more likable because we see what they don't see.
Yeah.
But you said you kind of related to the character. Why would you say you related to the character?
Well, I mean, I came up in that generation, sort of. I'm 10 years
Yeah.
younger than the main character, but I mean, a lot of the influences that he went through and a lot of the experiences that he had with hallucinogens. I mean, I've had my experience of those. Mine actually devolved into an addiction story.
Huh.
But I had experiences that lifted me out of like myself due to hallucinogens, and then also um, the just constant search for meaning and something deeper, and the collection of experiences that uh, lifted him out. I mean, it's especially lately. Like, I mean, I've been cataloging those experiences in my life and kind of seeing
Mm.
where they occurred and what they particularly meant, and all that. I mean, part of what the challenge to a human being is to get out of the everyday. I mean, there's two things going on, right? One, they tell you to focus on the now and the moment and be here in this moment, present. And that's a spiritual activity and I think worthy. But then there's
Mhm.
also the idea of looking at your life as an entire movement, not just a collection of episodes or instances, but like a whole, um, the the whole wide breadth of it, and
Yeah.
kind of looking to see what messages might be drawn from that. If it's a text, trying to read what the text is saying, and that's what I connected with in his story, was basically the fact that it was in book form. It had all these experiences that weren't so transformative that someone who went through them would feel like they're necessarily going insane, although maybe it could challenge people's worldview. But just the magic that he encountered, I
Mm.
thought was really moving for me, because I could see myself in it as both a young male musician and the broader human experience of it.
Mm. Well, that's great to hear. As I said, it's music to my ears.
Yeah,
Um, and I did want it to be relatable, and I haven't not. I mean, I have UFO experiences through dreams, and you have, as you know, when you take a psychedelic substance, which is not it's nothing to belittle. I admit, when I was younger, I didn't have the sense of sacred.
exactly.
I didn't know enough. I was a dope,
Well, this, I
and
mean, real quick, this goes back to one of my
yeah,
questions, which was
yeah,
the idea that hallucinogens as a avenue to this kind of thing, is there danger in that? And you're just exactly addressing that, I think. And I think that notion of holding it sacred is a large part of that. But go ahead.
yeah. I do think it's very sacred, and yeah, it is. Anytime we're anytime we're making a call out there, you got to be careful and respectful.
Yeah.
We're not in control, and there are levels to our consciousness and to what is possible that we don't we have no idea what the extent of that is. I've done a lot of reading, after I took when I was much younger. I had done it again, by the way. I had taken mushrooms and psychedelic substances after, you know, later than 17.
Mhm.
Um, but when you look at cultures that, in the Amazon, for example, there's a great there's a what you have to go through to cleanse yourself, and the respect for uh, and the different plants have different journeys, they're different kinds of teachers.
Yeah.
Some are mescalito is uh, Castaneda called that uh, the protector. But then there are other sacred plants that they're going to rip you out of this world and throw you into something, and it's going to be pretty intense.
Yeah.
And you should you should approach that with humility, in general, in life, all things.
Yeah.
As much as we're curious and enthusiastic, and we want to be explorative, and I do think it's always important, but especially because that these plants open doors to something vast
Yeah.
and powerful.
I mentioned my addiction story.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've done over the years after my recovery was go back and read testimonials about ibogaine.
Hmm.
And that is very much, I think, what you just described. I mean, people go through that experience and come out of it somehow, physically and emotionally, unburdened by the addiction. But the descriptions of what they go through are, it sounds traumatic and existential and all these different things, but it's almost like a shamanic initiation,
It's very much so. Yeah.
They're not dismembered physically in their visions, but they have like a psychological dismemberment, sort of, and they have to review everything that they've, gone through in life, and it makes them reassess their actions. And
Hmm.
if you go into that like it's a fun Saturday night, I don't know what you're going to experience, but I mean, I fear for you. But if
Yeah.
you're going into it humbly and like I'm ready to accept the lessons that this might teach me, then I think there's lots of room for transcendence there.
Yeah.
But you're a musician and you're an author, and the arts are a huge part of, I think, of our available mechanisms for transcendence. There's a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. And I'm sure you're familiar with like musicians' flow. You talked about it a little
Mhm.
bit, where like people will get into the niche of this kind of perfect, exquisite concentration, and that's when their most creative work flows. And that's different. That's a different kind of experience than like touching, like entering a new realm, kind of, because you're not. It's like it's about the activity, not about the perception of what's around you. But can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that? And I mean, do you have experiences with that? And how does that relate to this transcendent idea?
Sure. So I think music is a vehicle, and it certainly when you take a consume a psychedelic plant or substance, music is the rocket ship, or river to take you places. And some music was designed very specifically. And when you they'll say, well, do you have any Allman Brothers? Put that on, or Grateful Dead, or something that has a kind of flowing quality to it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I understand. I think heavy metal might be a little rough, if you're in that kind of state. Um, I went to, I did a series of interviews. I was lucky and blessed to meet indigenous artists around the country.
Yeah.
And through these different introductions, I met someone who invited me to, my wife and I went to a ceremony. It was the San Pedro ceremony. Um, First of all, the humility with which uh, the shaman, guided us, and it was very, very positive, and that really helped to frame the whole experience, and giving us a sense of awe, and that everything, the center of all of our lives, and the most important thing was love, is love, and the sense of humility and gratitude. So this was very grounding, but this was all accompanied by music. So there was singing and drumming, and the San Pedro is a kind of light. It's a light alkaloid, like it's related to mescaline, but it's not as intensely hallucinogenic. But it took me on a feeling journey, on a emotional journey. My mother was at the time was dying, and when people are going through those stages, they're going through dementia. They can become very cantankerous, and they could become combative. And the journey was kind of taking me to a place in my heart of saying, I mean, I was very good to my mom, but to an opening of love and compassion even more. Um, my mom we had the kind of relationship I could say, "You're driving me nuts, mom. Please, okay." And she would kind of back off. But so the music in that case, and often is the case, you have in the Amazon, they call it the Icaros. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but it's songs that are sung that are specific to guide you to your experience. Now, that being said, I think music has other qualities too, because it's a magical art.
Yeah.
And there are things that happen in music that defy common sense. I mean, Paul McCartney wrote, uh, was it Yesterday he wrote, In a Dream, or Eleanor Rigby. I think it was Yesterday, but that's enigmatic. He
Yeah.
woke up with the entire song, the melody, not the words necessarily.
Yeah.
How does that happen? How does that get delivered to you? And there are other things that people have conveyed to me of miraculous things that happen that are delivered via music.
Yeah.
Someone is given an instrument, a friend told me a story that his partner passed away from cancer, and she left him a flute. And someone we both know who's and this is coming out in a book, so I don't want to give too much away.
Sure.
Yet someone who's a pretty well-known musician picked up the flute, was asked if he could pick up the flute, and he composed a song on the moment, in the moment. Not really a flute player, composed a song, and I have a recording of them in real time, kind of iterating the song, coming up with the melody. And then the flute never played again. It just went silent. It was as if, now, of course someone can say, well, it just broke or something. But it was sitting there dormant. It hadn't been touched. It seemed to kind of awaken in this time and then went to sleep.
Yeah.
Now, I'm asking to receive the stories, and I'm not doing a scientific investigation. I'm just collecting the stories, respecting and absolutely respecting the truth of the story. The people that are conveying them to me are trustworthy, and I believe them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was a long answer, but I think art takes us, could be visual art, music. I think music is one of those, there's so many levels to what music brings us. It's transportive. It can, take us back to when we were, you remember a person, and it's so intimate. Someone you loved, a song comes on, or a time in your life, or think of all of the, graduations, funerals, weddings. They're all accompanied. Spiritual events, very much so, accompanied by music. Church.
Yeah.
Um, and also there is a language of music, I think, that is as yet understood. I mean, there's the immediate language of music that I can hear music from, a country in Africa or some remote part of China, and it could move me. It could make me cry, or it could make me emote, and I understand it immediately.
Yeah.
I don't need language.
Yeah.
But then there are deeper layers to that, I think, of something magical in music. Have you ever read Terence McKenna?
I have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And he's, first of all, he's a super funny and hysterical, kind of a self-proclaimed, kind of crazy man, scholar. And he believed that there was an alien kind of information and communication coming through across from the music.
Yeah.
And he heard music, and he kind of drives his brother Dennis crazy with, telling the story. But that they believed that if you could replicate this music that he had heard, that you could transform space time, is what he was saying.
Yeah.
And I think there's something there.
Yeah.
I think there's something there.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely agree with you on that. Um, this ostensibly is a show about UFOs. We've
Yeah.
covered a lot about, interviewed a lot of folks around that topic, and that's led into sort of this idea that maybe reality isn't something that we are, or isn't what we've expected it to be. But I mean, apart from the book, what is your interest in UFOs, and what are
Mm-hmm.
your thoughts on what's been going on? I mean,
Yeah.
judging from your book, it seems like you don't necessarily expect the answers to be coming from government about what a UFO is and how we can engage with it, or what, that
Mm-hmm.
it's saying something, signaling something deeper. But can you talk to us
Sure.
about how you feel about it and whether you follow it and those
Yeah.
sorts of
Well, thank you for asking that question. Well, it's interesting. The recent report that came out, as Coulthard said, was a pile of dog. He used interesting words. A
Yes,
pile
he
of
did.
crap is what it was, and it wasn't even scientific. I mean, they didn't address the pilot testimonials, the radar, the infrared, and all of the data. Um, So let me go back just for a second. I
Sure.
think that most people believe that there must be intelligent life in the universe, other intelligent life. I mean, I think there's intelligent life on this planet that we're not listening to,
Yeah.
which is the sounds of birds and stuff I allude to in the book there, the richness of the ecosystem and the complexity of how all this works together. And we don't even notice it. Not all of us, some more than others. But I think most people, we live in so we think it's a 5 billion year old planet. We believe that the universe is 15 billion years old. There are something like 6 septillion stars in the visible universe. And I don't know the exact amount, but millions of planets, maybe more. Why would this all be for us?
Yeah.
Why would anyone? It's such an irrational idea to think. It sounds like, pre-Copernican. It sounds like this silly notion that this whole thing is set up so that I can get a new car and I can, but have the fanciest, newest clothes. And if you look at cultures around the world, there's a much more openness to these ideas. Now, that being said, I would say that I began to take this. I think what really hit me was the New York Times report Leslie Kean put out. And uh, that was interesting. The TikTok video,
Yeah.
TikTok. I always say TikTok. I get confused. So those things were, you had data now. You had data and it was irrefutable. And then you have testimony. The other thing that was very important is the intentionality. So he said that there's, gosh, I'm forgetting the term, but that there's a term that pilots use. It probably will come to me. And it's a term, it's sort of like when you're in a football squad or in a sports squad, you kind of have here is where that's where you go here when you don't know where to go.
Cap point.
Cap point, that's it.
The
That's
cap
it.
point. Yeah. I'm not
That's
exactly
it.
sure what cap stands for, but yeah. Yeah.
It's the cap point. And I've written about it, so I should know.
That's all right,
Um,
man. I'm
this old noggin can only hold so much. And the object appeared at the cap point. So that's peculiar. It's not
yeah.
just that there are things that are zipping about, and as many people will tell you, and I've, their accounts they're specific. Their accounts, their testimonies are, it may sometimes just be a thing moving across, but there's also communication.
Yeah.
There's also, which takes us to another point. But I'll get to that. But you'd asked me, where, I would say that as of 2017, I started to dig deeper. And then I started to read some books on it. And I read Jeff Kripal's books and Diana Pasulka. And then, I've read a mountain of books.
Let me real
And
quick. I want to
yeah,
read this from your
yeah,
book,
yeah,
which
please.
fits right into this. Um, and maybe this is autobiographical. You said that there's sometimes that some of it's sprinkled into the book.
Yeah.
Quote, when you find yourself going down the UFO rabbit hole, it's hard to stop your momentum. Like a freight train barreling forward, you see connections between things you might have missed previously. The fact that quantum mechanics is connected to consciousness, that the mind collapses the wave function, makes my heart beat faster. I love that. Is this all a simulation? Are we some kind of experiment in a cosmic laboratory? Or is it that we just can't wrap our minds around the deeper truth of things? The second I understand something, I sink deeper into the mystery, like mental quicksand. That is so perfect for what I've gone through, and it sounds like what you went through as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thanks for reading that.
Yeah,
And yeah,
no.
and I do think I think that this thing, it branches out into, it includes, and I want it to include, that is my journey as a writer, as a thinker, is to increase the scope of this subject to include other subject matter. I'm
Yeah.
not the only one doing this. I mean, you read Diana Pasulka's work, and she's, talking to different kinds of scientists and equating, for instance, the history of religion with ufology. She's a professor of religion, as is Jeff Kripal.
Mm-hmm.
And they see the parallels between something extraordinary happening here, out there, lightning bolts, comes down, does something dazzling and amazing, and disappears and leaves this something behind that we're struck with, and we're awestruck, perplexed, and it becomes part of the mystery of our existence.
Yeah.
And so, I would say that there are, what's interesting about this subject matter, ufology, is it's a broad subject, and you have so many types of people, which is great. Um, it's in some respects, as someone who studied bluegrass and then has gone out into the bluegrass community, there are some parallels in that you have people across this political spectrum. It's, people that are super hippies to people that are, very much to the right. And I'm not interested in the details of all of that. For me, I'm very much interested in the philosophical aspects and the spiritual aspects of this,
Yeah.
and how it's relatable to just to everyday existence.
Yeah.
So I don't want to compartmentalize it. I have to admit, I love UFO pictures. I love UFO images. As I wrote in the book, I started to play with some digital tools and some artificial intelligence tools, and man, I would love to I wish we just had a UFO art kind of, and that's what I'm trying to contribute to.
Yeah.
UFO literature, not science fiction necessarily, but UFO literature, UFO art, UFO music. And there is stuff out there for sure. I'd like more of it. I just I can't get enough. But I'm not hooked only on the shiny metallic or the dazzling technology aspect of it.
Yeah.
There is something else there.
One of the things that you write about in the book, which I thought was really important also, was that different times have had different transcendent signals that reach people, like whether it's the Marian apparitions or
Mhm.
whatever else throughout history is now manifesting as UFOs. And then you say an interesting thing about AI at one point. You say that AI may help guide those sorts of visions in the future. And I wanted to ask you about that. Like, what did you mean by that? And I don't know, you may not even remember the quote necessarily, but that somehow that's going to help us interpret what these visionary experiences either
Mm.
may be, or I don't know. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and it's a speculative. Diana Pasulka writes a lot about that she's a fervent kind of believer in AI, that and I don't necessarily share that. I don't know if I agree with that, but some speculate that the when our AI develops sufficiently, that first of all, the non-human intelligence will want to talk to that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not us, because we're just mere humans with our limited thinking. Um, and just the idea that with now you have artificial intelligence, and we haven't mastered it yet. There's a lot of buzz. There's a lot of stuff that it can do, but it's also wily and out of control. But if we use AI to analyze artifacts, and you're using, multiple kinds of data points, interesting what you can learn
Yeah.
maybe from it. So I think that there's potential for, and again, it's wildly speculative, but there's potential for maybe these intelligences that we communicate with, or that communicate with us, are reflections of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do feel that there is a psychological component to this, and I'm not saying it in a sense of it's a you're hallucinating. That's not what I mean. There's a relationship of consciousness that you mentioned in the quote, we are involved in quantum mechanics. Consciousness impacts the outcome. That's a staggering idea. That's
Yeah. That we
super
haven't come
interesting.
to terms with. We
We
still
haven't come
haven't
to
come to terms
terms
with
with.
that at all.
And it's interesting that some people will sort of just say, well, just math, or something. You know, uh, everything is math, but math isn't everything, you
Yeah.
know? So I don't know if I answered your question, but artificial intelligence has this untapped power, and it will tell us more
Yeah.
about ourselves over time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, even if it's just mere pattern recognition and that sort of thing, or data mining, I mean, all of
Hmm.
those kinds of things. And then if we get to a general intelligence, an artificial general intelligence that will ask questions that we don't even know we should be asking about it, which I think could potentially be powerful.
Yeah,
But I'm also scared about what AI might ultimately, and I'm not talking
sure.
necessarily like, Skynet, Terminator kind of stuff
Uh-huh.
necessarily, but I worry that in the presence of a quick way to do intellectual legwork, we're going to let our own faculties atrophy and then kind of lose our capabilities, which I
Hmm.
mean, to sort of speed up the degradation of humanity is my probably my biggest fear in regards to that. But
Yeah.
one thing you said earlier about your writing literature, and that's one thing I wanted to. The first thing that occurred to me was that this is the first UFO book I've read that I felt like was literary. And I'm not dogging anybody else who's written books because there are some fantastic books out there. There's great books, and I've had a lot of those folks on my show. But yours was aiming for the literary crowd, I felt like, and I
Mm.
was moved by that because I felt that that was brave, and I felt like it was successful, which are two important things in this. Um, I feel like that might be the mechanism for sort of bringing these ideas and these notions to a broader audience, or one that's more that's sort of closer. I mean, this might sound kind of arrogant, but to the deeper thinkers of our society, if they can engage
Mm.
with it on familiar terrain.
Mm.
Um, can you talk about the challenges of that? I mean, you mentioned it a little bit before with with publishing and whether or not people are open to these kinds of narratives. How do we make it more acceptable um, to the gatekeepers?
Well, thank you for saying that, James. I genuinely really appreciate that in a real way. That hit me really in the heart. So thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, there are friends I have, that giggle when when it's okay. I mean, I could take it. I'm a tough kid. I can handle it. But I don't want to go out there and combat everybody. I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in that. But I've engaged, my PhD friends that uh, very strictly materialist points of view through questioning. And when you question people, if they want to engage with you in a serious way, if they just want to goof on you, which is very possible, then you're having an ad hominem argument and it's not going to go anywhere. But I found you can take the rug from underneath someone.
Yeah,
Now you'll notice in the book that the narrator doesn't do that very well because I didn't want him to do that well. I wanted the narrator to be tripped up, and I wanted the narrator to not be fully in control. So yeah, I mean, there are people, my mother-in-law, like kind of the UFO book. Oh my gosh, you know, you're going to get those giggles and laughs. And then when I ask certain questions, you you get people calming down.
yeah.
And what I loved about Jeff Kripal's book, The Flip, is
Such a great book. Such a
it's
great
a
book.
great book. It's a great
Yeah,
book. I mean, he is in such control of his language, and he's so sober in his approach. I really like that about him.
yeah,
But he really targets that to the academic community who poo-poos these things.
yeah,
Who's of course, not everyone. This is not a general. There are people studying the history of religion, and they're studying comparative religions, this is a part of that subject matter. But I do realize that there are some people that are they're gonna kind of shake their head and, well, give me a fair chance to talk about it if you want to. And if you don't want to, that's okay.
Yeah.
I do think we need a bridge, James, between there are people that are, I think people are talking, about disclosure. I mean, David Grush came forward. You have the pilots came forward. Who's saying anything? The government isn't stopping them. Then
Yeah.
the government puts out this report that's completely ridiculous, that doesn't even deal with the data. And still, is this causing a major revolution? People are just sleeping. They don't care.
Yeah.
Maybe pockets of people. I feel that an art, if we can create an art, a bridge to the folks over here and the folks over there, and create some way of having a dialogue that's productive. That was my hope and goal.
Yeah.
To not make it too deep into one thing, and not to commit to a point of view so firmly, but to present the question, what do we know? And for all we know, there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Um, we the I think part of what the government has obviously been hiding. What's interesting is the conspiracy stuff. Take that for just a moment.
Yeah.
I mean, the government has been doing a conspiracy on all of us since its inception. Of taking, some people had freedom, some people didn't. I mean, the government is in control of the water you drink, the soil, the air quality, the food that you eat. I mean, it's this is just another aspect of that. It's the government is, the corporations own us and use us as kind of pus bags to pump their wares and whatever it is they want us to buy.
Yeah.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist. It's just, it's rife. Society is rife with all of that. This is just another aspect of that. So I like what Whitley Strieber says, that the phenomena is cryptic. It's cryptic. It communicates with us in an enigmatic way. So the government's response has been cryptic in how it's approached it. I mean, it's certainly been interested in it, and it's been exploring it in all of its manifestations, whether that be remote viewing or just the interest in the data, in the study of phenomena they don't understand. Part of the problem is, what is the government going to say? Well, there are these behaviors that occur that are inexplicable. They're completely enigmatic. Not to mention that they can do physical feats that we're vastly superior to ours. So that's a concern of safety. But they don't know what to say. I
Yeah.
think part of it is philosophically, it's scientifically, it just completely pulls the rug out from everyday consensus reality.
Yeah.
And what is the government's biggest interest? Is the Tao,
Yeah.
these kind
Day-to-day
of,
stability, right? I mean, yeah.
yeah, they don't want, I think that the government is afraid of people having a sense of the sacredness of of life. That just to begin, just that statement alone, the sacredness of life is, that gets in the way of everyday functioning and the quarterly results, revenues.
Mhm.
And this makes us think, well, this could potentially make us think, well, what is the purpose of life? I mean, we already have that problem,
Yeah.
but it really undermines it in a very profound way.
Well, and it's just like, I mean, I'm sure you remember after 9/11, it was like we had this gigantic catastrophe and people wanted to take a moment and grok it, and they were mourning, and there were, concerts and memorials and everything else. And the government's response was keep shopping
Right.
because that's the engine, they think, of what keeps our society going. So no matter what you're feeling or what you're going through, that is secondary to keeping the lights on or
Mm-hmm.
the money flowing. And that
Yeah.
if the reality of a UFO is, revealed to the public, they're going to want to take a minute. Even if they eventually get back on, the treadmill, they're going to want to take a minute and grok that. And that minute is going to cost people billions,
Hmm.
And I think that that's ultimately one of the things they're ultimately afraid of. Plus the fact that if it comes out that they've been lying, which we all know they've been lying. I mean, we have secret agencies, the intelligence agencies, that whole business is to lie, whether it's to the American people or to foreign governments. It's about maintaining an image of who we are as a people, and that is often a lie. There's just no escaping
Hmm.
that. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I think that whole system, hopefully, its days are numbered, but who knows? We're
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting what happened after 9/11, was we went to a long war with terrorism. And what does that even mean?
yeah,
And now it's interesting that the way it's framed in Congress is it's framed from the perspective of national security. It's not framed from the perspective of spiritual revolution.
yeah,
It's not. And uh, the profound insight that this gives us as human beings in this universe. I mean, many people that are involved in this stuff, you know, uh, scientists, uh, writers, they do recognize that. Um, but that's and I'm not saying you need government, you have to have roads, you have to have, you need police, it's silly to say we don't need these things. We have a big sprawling society. We have to have ways to work together and to be safe together.
yeah,
There could be other better, more interesting ways to do that, but this is the one that's we have right now. Um, yeah, so I just feel like disclosure is just, not going to happen. It's just you're going to have people that come forth, say things. Now, Grush, for what he has said, should be in jail if it's not true, for
exactly
perjury.
right. Yeah,
So, but that's not happened because, like most things in our, in our society, it's sort of someone comes out and says something profound, and then it's, news at 11.
yeah.
you know.
Well, and the people who are trying to refute it aren't taking the same steps that he took. It's like he
Hmm.
got up in front of Congress under oath and said what he said, and the people who are refuting it, I mean, even in this most recent report, they signed on the record that what they said was true. Well, that doesn't mean anything. Like I can sign any note I write and say, well, it's on the record, but that has no
Right.
force of law.
It's on an oath.
So yeah, exactly right. And so one other thing I wanted to ask you about before we go, you're a
Yeah.
journalist, a music journalist. That's been one of the biggest disappointments to me. I'm a reporter for a small TV station in Northern California. I cover, boards of supervisors and that sorts of thing, which is important. Don't get me wrong, but seems to be a pathological lack of interest in this subject. To my mind, even if it's all fake, there's a massive story here because you have a lot of highly qualified sources within the government who are saying it's true. So either there is a wildly crazy strand of, public servant in government that needs to be dealt with, or some of these things are true. How do you understand the lack of diligence on the part of media in this? And is there any way, absent the cliche of aliens landing on the White House lawn, to inspire more coverage?
Hmm. I think this has long been the subject matter has long been in academia and in mainstream occupations. It's a kind of death knell.
Yeah,
Um, I think that's changing. I do think that's changing, and uh, more data, more engagement, more normalization of it. Um, People coming forward. I mean, I talk to people, and it's interesting. I talked to a friend who has a PhD and is adamantly opposed to the topic, and then he tells me he had a sighting. And he says it's in this remote part of the country, and there was an object that zipped, was here and zipped away. So part of what I feel, and probably you as well, and what you're doing, I know this is no easy task for you to do, to read a book, to read many books, talk to different people. You have to do a lot of work to prepare for this, but you believe that it's a worthy subject and you want to engage in a normalization of the subject, or at least an
Absolutely.
openness to having it.
Yeah, exactly right.
And I do get, you get giggles and stuff, and you have to have tough skin, and you have to be able to handle that. So I think as a journalist, I do music journalism. So that's, but my music journalism it can get far out.
Yeah,
I'm not, just talking about, I go deep into the spiritual as well in my, so it's not for everyone.
sure.
So I just hope that we can find ways to popularize and to have this conversation, and to engage the intellectual materialist types and just everyday people, and bring us together instead of creating division and pointing at who has the right info. But let's marry these groups and this subject. It's the most profound, the deepest, richest, to me, one of the most interesting subjects we can think about and talk about. So I invite people to come along the journey with me. And if you don't want to, that's okay.
Yeah. No, that's well put. And I think if someone wants to start the journey with a great book, yours is a great place to start. And I'm going to be diving into your bibliography because I really liked your book. But For All We Know is a fantastic read. It's not necessarily that long, so folks don't be intimidated by the length of it. It's just a beautiful poetic rendering of the ineffable. Thank you very much, Mike, for coming on the show.
James, thank you so much. You're a great host, and I appreciate, thank you for all of your insights and commentary. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully next time we'll have you back on when you do another project or anything like that. I'd be happy to have you back.
Yeah, I would love to come back. Please let's stay in touch. It's in the works now, and I'll have more to say soon.
Okay. All right. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye, James.
Bye-bye.